television courtroom had never witnessed such pure, unfiltered disrespect toward someone who had sacrificed everything for their country, Karen Daniels. A middle-aged real estate agent who drove a white BMW with vanity plates and wore designer suits like armor, sat in Judge Judy's courtroom with the kind of smug confidence that came only from years of bulldozing clients without consequence. Across from her sat James Crawford, a retired Marine Corps veteran whose weathered hands trembled slightly as he clutched a folder containing his late wife's photographs and property documents. What happened in the next few minutes would become the most viral courtroom moment in Internet history, shared millions of times across every social media platform imaginable, with the hashtag #RespectOurVeterans trending for nearly a week. But here's what makes this story absolutely shocking. Karen didn't just lose her case. She didn't just get embarrassed on national television. What Judge Judy did to her in those moments was so devastatingly brutal, so righteously furious, that it ended Karen's real estate career and made her one of the most hated women in America overnight. Before we show the exact moment when Karen mocked a decorated war veteran to his face and triggered Judge Judy's most legendary takedown ever captured on camera, make sure you hit that like button if you support our veterans and believe that people who disrespect them deserve real consequences. Subscribe so you never miss these explosive courtroom moments where entitled bullies finally meet someone who won't tolerate their behavior. What you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice and prove that karma is not only real, but perfectly timed now. Let's step inside the courtroom and see exactly how this situation exploded. James Crawford had never wanted to be in a courtroom. After decades of service in the United States Marine Corps, including multiple tours in Vietnam and Desert Storm, he had earned medals for bravery and sacrifice. He had bled for his country, buried friends on foreign soil, and come home with nightmares that still woke him up years later. His wife, Mary, had been his anchor through it all, the woman who held him during the darkest nights and celebrated with him during the good days. When Mary passed away from cancer, Jim felt as if half his soul had been torn away. The only thing left to do was sell the property Mary had inherited from her parents. A modest home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, it was meant to be simple closure, the final chapter in their love story. A way to honor Mary's memory by handling her affairs with integrity and discipline, just as he had lived his life. That's when Karen Daniels entered his life like a tornado wrapped in Chanel perfume. She promised premium service for a premium listing, flashed her credentials as a top-producing agent, and convinced Jim that his property would sell quickly under her expert guidance. Trusting her word, Jim signed the paperwork agreeing to a commission that would have rewarded Karen handsomely once the home sold. What Jim didn't know was that he had just become Karen's latest victim in a pattern of predatory behavior targeting elderly clients who didn't know how to fight back against aggressive real estate tactics and legal intimidation. Karen Daniels barely lifted a finger to earn her commission. In the months following the contract signing, she posted only a couple of photographs of Jim's property online, missed multiple open houses without explanation, and ignored numerous phone calls and emails from Jim asking for updates. When he finally showed up at her office unannounced, Karen treated him like an annoyance, barely looking up from her phone as she assured him that premium properties take time to sell and that he needed to be patient. But Jim wasn't naive. He began doing his own research, talking to other agents, and discovering that Karen's so-called premium service was actually neglect that violated professional standards. When he politely asked to terminate the contract so he could work with someone competent, Karen's friendly facade vanished. She refused to end the agreement and instead demanded her full commission plus additional marketing fees, despite having done almost nothing to earn them. Through her attorney, she sent Jim an intimidating letter filled with legal threats and warnings about his credit, making it clear that she always got paid, whether she deserved it or not. For Jim, this demand wasn't just a financial blow. It was a moral betrayal. He had lived his life by the principles of honor and integrity, keeping his word no matter the cost. Karen Daniels represented everything he had fought against. Bullies who used power and intimidation to crush people who couldn't fight back. What made Karen truly dangerous wasn't just her negligence or her aggressive collection tactics. It was her complete lack of empathy, combined with an inflated sense of superiority that came from years of getting away with predatory behavior. She had perfected the art of targeting vulnerable clients, particularly elderly homeowners dealing with grief, confusion, or financial stress. She knew exactly which clients would be too intimidated to fight back, too trusting to question her authority, or too overwhelmed by their circumstances to navigate the complaint process with the real estate board. Karen kept detailed files on her targets, noting their financial situations, emotional vulnerabilities, and the likelihood of them mounting an effective legal defense. She had faced several previous complaints with the state real estate board, but her expensive attorneys always managed to get each one dismissed or quietly settled before any formal sanctions could be imposed. Her confidence as she prepared for her appearance on Judge Judy was unshakable. She had spent weeks gathering what she believed was an airtight case, printing legal articles from random internet sites, rehearsing condescending explanations in front of her bathroom mirror, and selecting the perfect designer outfit to project success and authority. She told her friends and colleagues that she was going to school the television judge on real estate law, expose Jim Crawford as just another difficult client trying to avoid his contractual obligations, and use the national spotlight to generate great publicity for her business. What Karen didn't know was that Judge Judy had already spotted numerous inconsistencies in her paperwork before she even walked into the courtroom. The judge was preparing to make an example out of this predatory real estate agent, an example that would echo through television history. The courtroom buzzed with its usual electric energy as cameras rolled and the audience settled into their seats, expecting another routine small claims dispute. Production assistants completed their final checks, while the bailiff took his position near the bench. Judge Judy reviewed her notes one last time, her trademark focus radiating through the room. No one present could have imagined they were about to witness a moment that would define courtroom television for an entire generation. Jim Crawford entered first, wearing a modest gray suit with a small American flag pin on his lapel. His military bearing was still evident, shoulders back, spine straight. As he took his position at the plaintiff's table, he clutched his folder of documents to his chest like a shield, visibly nervous, yet maintaining the composure drilled into him through years of service. Karen Daniels strode in moments later as if she were walking a runway instead of entering a courtroom. Her Chanel suit was perfectly tailored, her Louis Vuitton briefcase swung from her manicured hand, and she didn't even glance at Jim as she passed him, treating him with the same dismissive indifference she had shown throughout their entire business relationship. Judge Judy opened the proceedings with her signature no-nonsense tone, her voice cutting through the air with surgical precision. She reviewed the basic facts. Jim was suing to recover damages after Karen had failed to market his property, while demanding full commission plus additional fees. Jim's opening testimony was quiet and dignified, his voice trembling slightly with emotion as he explained that selling his late wife's property was meant to honor her memory and bring closure after months of grief. He laid out Karen's negligence clearly, ignored calls, missed open houses, and broken promises. When he mentioned his military service, it wasn't for sympathy, but as context for his values. Why keeping one's word mattered so deeply. In the Marines, we were taught that integrity means everything, he said softly, smoothing the papers before him. I signed a contract in good faith, and I expected the same in return. Karen's reaction was immediate and telling. She rolled her eyes so dramatically that the cameras caught every second of her contempt. She smirked when Jim's voice broke discussing his wife's death, as if his grief were a performance. She shifted in her seat, sighed loudly, and treated the entire proceeding like an irritating waste of her valuable time. Judge Judy noticed every gesture, every eye roll, every display of disrespect. Her expression began to harden the calm before the storm that longtime viewers knew too well. When the judge finally invited Karen to present her side, Karen didn't wait for the full invitation before interrupting with her opening statement. "Your Honor, this is a very simple case of buyer's remorse," she began, her voice dripping with condescension as she waved toward Jim. "Mr. Crawford signed a binding contract and now wants to back out because he doesn't like the reality of real estate timelines." Karen pulled out her folder of internet-printed legal articles with the flourish of someone convinced she was about to deliver a devastating argument. Karen began her performance with what she believed was a bombshell of legal expertise. She launched into a lecture about contract law, real estate commission structures, and industry standards as if she were educating a child about basic concepts they couldn't possibly understand. "Honestly, I don't see what his personal sob story has to do with contract law," Karen said, referring to Jim's mention of his wife's death with such casual cruelty that several audience members audibly gasped. "This is a business transaction, and emotions don't change the legal obligations both parties agreed to when signatures went on that paperwork." Judge Judy's warning look was unmistakable to everyone, except Karen, who was too wrapped up in her own performance to notice that she was lighting fuses on bombs that were about to explode directly in her face. When Jim tried to respond to one of Karen's accusations, she actually talked over him, her voice rising to drown out his attempt to speak. "Please, I'm trying to explain reality here," she said, with another exaggerated sigh that made her contempt for this elderly veteran painfully clear to everyone watching. Judge Judy's intervention was swift and sharp. "Miss Daniels, he is allowed to speak in this courtroom. You will wait your turn." Karen sighed again, louder this time, and muttered, "Fine, whatever," under her breath, like a petulant teenager being scolded by a parent she didn't respect. The tension in the courtroom built toward something unprecedented, something everyone could feel crackling in the air like electricity before a lightning strike. Judge Judy began questioning Karen about her supposed marketing efforts, asking for specific evidence of the premium service she had promised Jim when convincing him to sign the contract. Karen fumbled through her papers, making excuses about market conditions and timing, deflecting every question with the ease of someone practiced in avoiding accountability. That's when Jim quietly interjected, his voice steady, but filled with the kind of pain that comes from being repeatedly dismissed and disrespected. "Your Honor, I just wanted honest service. In my years in the Marines, we were taught that when you give your word, you keep it. I trusted Miss Daniels to do right by my wife's memory, and instead, she treated us like we didn't matter." The moment that would break the internet happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Karen actually laughed out loud, a mocking sound that echoed through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. "Oh, please," she said, making exaggerated air quotes with her perfectly manicured fingers. "Playing the soldier card. How original. Everyone who can't win an argument suddenly becomes Captain America, trying to guilt-trip people with their service record." She turned slightly toward the camera with a smirk, as if sharing an inside joke with America about how predictable and manipulative Jim's mention of military service had been. The courtroom didn't just go silent, it entered another dimension where sound itself seemed afraid to exist. Jim's face showed shock first, then deep hurt, and finally a controlled anger, the kind of restraint born from decades of military discipline. holding him back from reacting the way every part of him wanted to. Audience members sat frozen, mouths hanging open in disbelief. The court officer even took an instinctive step forward, his protective instincts triggered by witnessing something so fundamentally wrong it seemed to violate basic human decency. But the most dramatic transformation happened in Judge Judy herself. Her face hardened into granite. Her eyes became lasers of pure fury. And when she spoke, her voice dropped into that terrifyingly quiet tone that had made even seasoned attorneys break out in cold sweats throughout her long career on the bench. "Miss Daniels," Judge Judy began, her voice calm but cutting like steel, "would you like to repeat what you just said for the record?" Karen, still oblivious to the magnitude of her mistake and the volcanic rage building behind Judge Judy's composure, actually doubled down on her disrespect, with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for her behavior. "I said he's playing the soldier card, Your Honor. It's manipulative. People use their military service to get sympathy and avoid accountability all the time. It's a tactic, and frankly, I think it's disrespectful to actual veterans, who don't go around constantly reminding everyone about their service." Charter. The audacity of Karen Daniels lecturing anyone about respect, especially respect for veterans, while sitting in a courtroom after months of negligence and predatory behavior, was so breathtaking that even the camera operators seemed to pause. Judge Judy leaned forward in her chair with deliberate slowness, the movement of a predator finally deciding to stop playing with its prey. "The soldier card," Judge Judy repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you call years of military service? Tours in Vietnam? Service in Desert Storm? A Purple Heart that means this man bled for his country? A Bronze Star with valor that means he showed extraordinary courage under enemy fire? That's a card to you? Something people play to manipulate real estate agents?" Karen's confident expression began to crack around the edges as she... The moment finally came when Karen began to sense that something had gone terribly wrong with her performance, but her arrogance kept her from backing down completely. "Well, I just mean that it shouldn't be relevant to a contract dispute," she stammered, her voice losing some of its earlier certainty. Judge Judy leaned back and asked a question that began Karen's systematic unraveling. "Tell me, Miss Daniels, what have you sacrificed for this country? What have you given up so that people like Mr. Crawford could have the freedom to serve and come home to pursue the American dream?" Karen's answer revealed her obliviousness. "I pay my taxes," she said, as if fulfilling a legal obligation could compare to bleeding on foreign soil. Scattered laughter from the audience finally pierced her bubble of superiority, and the first hints of genuine fear appeared in her eyes. Judge Judy spent the next stretch of time methodically dismantling every part of Karen's case, with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a warrior defending something sacred. She examined Karen's so-called marketing efforts, holding up the sparse social media activity that Karen claimed justified her commission. "You want that much for 2 social posts?" Judge Judy asked with heavy sarcasm. "That would make each post cost more than many influencers with massive followings charge." She then walked through each missed open house, naming dates and exposing Karen's pathetically flimsy excuses. "Another client needed me, traffic. No response to Mr. Crawford's calls, a late text message after the scheduled start time." "This is your premium service," Judge Judy said. "This is what you promised a grieving widower who trusted you with his late wife's property." Karen tried to interrupt and deflect. Blame the market. Blame unrealistic expectations. But Judge Judy shut her down every time with the authority of someone who had been exposing manipulative liars for decades. Then the judge did something rarely seen on television. She made the case deeply personal. "Miss Daniels, let me tell you about my father," Judge Judy said, and the courtroom fell absolutely silent. She spoke of a father who had been an ordinary, professional but, before that, a soldier in a terrible war. He had stormed beaches where young men were cut down, seen friends blown apart by shells, and watched boys who should have been at dances die, calling for their mothers in tongues he could not understand. He returned home haunted, waking from nightmares many nights a week for decades, reliving the worst moments of human history. "My father never asked for special treatment because of his service," Judge Judy continued, voice growing stronger. "He never played the soldier card, as you so disgustingly put it. He only wanted the basic respect any human deserves, the acknowledgement that he gave something precious and irreplaceable in service to something larger than himself. Ite. Jim Crawford is exactly like my father," she said, fixing Karen with a gaze that made the agent physically shrink in her seat. "He served this country for many years. He suffered wounds and earned honors that mean he bled for your freedom to drive your fancy car, wear designer suits, and build a predatory real estate business. He showed extraordinary courage while you were likely worrying about how your hair looked for an open house. He sacrificed years of his life, his peace of mind, and his sense of safety, so people like you could sleep securely without ever considering the cost of that security. And you have the unmitigated gall to sit in my courtroom and mock him for mentioning his service." The courtroom was so silent that the hum of the cameras sounded deafening against the collective held breath of everyone present. Karen sat frozen, her earlier confidence evaporated and replaced by dawning horror as she realized she had made a catastrophic mistake on national television. Her hands shook visibly, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run, and tears welled in her eyes. Not remorse, but fear and self-pity as her world collapsed in real time. Judge Judy was not finished. She rose from her chair, a rare and symbolic motion that signaled the proceedings had transcended ordinary judicial bounds and entered the realm of moral imperative. "Here is my ruling, Miss Daniels," she said, and then began to deliver the verbal annihilation that would be replayed across social platforms for years to come. "This will be a lesson you never forget for the rest of your miserable life," Judge Judy announced, her voice rising to fill every corner of the courtroom with righteous fury. "Not only do you receive no commission for the nothing you did to earn it, but you will pay Mr. James Crawford damages for breach of contract, for failing to perform the services you promised, and for the emotional distress you caused by targeting a grieving widower, exploiting his trust, and mocking his military service in my courtroom." Karen's mouth fell open in disbelief. She stammered, "But that's not fair, Your Honor. I have expenses. I have a business to run. I can't just give away money because he got his feelings hurt over a simple business disagreement." The words were barely out of her mouth before Judge Judy unleashed the verbal assault that would become one of the most viral moments in courtroom history. "Fairness," Judge Judy thundered, her voice shaking the air. "You want to talk to me about fairness? This man served his country for decades, so people like you could build your pathetic little real estate empire on the foundation of freedom that he and millions like him paid for with their blood, their trauma, and their sacrifice. He bled on foreign soil while you worried about your commission checks. He buried friends in unmarked graves while you were choosing your next luxury handbag. He came home with nightmares that will haunt him for the rest of his life, while you sleep peacefully in your comfortable bed without ever thinking about the cost of that peace. Don't you dare sit in my courtroom and lecture me about fairness when you don't even understand the basic concept of human decency. let alone the meaning of sacrifice. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, something that almost never happened during a live proceeding. The bailiff made no move to quiet them. Even he was caught up in the emotional magnitude of what was unfolding. Judge Judy pointed directly at Karen, a gesture that would be immortalized in screenshots and replayed online for years. "You are a predator, Miss Daniels. You target vulnerable people. You exploit their grief and confusion. You manipulate them with legal language they don't understand. And then you have the audacity to act offended when someone calls you out on your reprehensible behavior. You saw a widower trying to honor his late wife's memory, and you saw dollar signs. You saw someone living on a fixed income and saw an opportunity to extract maximum profit for minimum effort. You saw a man who believed in honor and keeping one's word. And you saw someone you could manipulate with a contract he trusted you to uphold in good faith. Well, let me tell you something about contracts, Miss Daniels. They require both parties to act in good faith. You didn't. You violated every standard of professional conduct and basic human decency." The gavel came down with the finality of a guillotine, echoing through the courtroom like thunder. "Case dismissed. Get out of my courtroom, Miss Daniels. And before you go," Judge Judy added, her tone laced with razor-sharp sarcasm, "let me say something that I hope haunts you every single day for the rest of your life. Thank you for your service." The biting irony of those last words made several audience members gasp. Karen stumbled from her chair as if struck, her designer briefcase slipping from her trembling hands and spilling papers across the floor. She tried to speak, to form some kind of defense or plea, but no sound came. Tears streamed down her face, smearing her makeup into dark streaks that made her look like a melting wax figure of the arrogant woman who had strutted in earlier. She gathered her things with shaking hands and fled the courtroom, while the audience sent her off with scattered applause and murmurs about respecting veterans. The cameras captured every second, every trembling step, every moment of the complete destruction of a woman who had walked in believing she would outsmart a television judge and walked out as the most despised figure in America. But the most powerful moment came after Karen had gone. Jim Crawford rose slowly from his seat. With quiet dignity, shaped by decades of service and respect for authority, he came to attention and rendered a crisp salute to Judge Judy. The courtroom fell silent again, not with shock this time, but with reverence. And then, in a gesture that stunned everyone present, Judge Judy, who had spent her entire career maintaining professional distance, returned the salute. The image of a judge honoring a veteran in open court became instantly iconic, shared across social media with captions about respect, honor, and what real justice looks like. The audience rose together in a standing ovation that lasted a full minute. Even the hardened court staff, who had seen thousands of cases, had tears in their eyes as they witnessed a moment of pure respect between two people who truly understood the meaning of service and sacrifice. Within hours of the episode airing, the clip had spread across every corner of the internet, a defining moment of accountability, empathy, and truth. The television courtroom had never witnessed such pure, unfiltered disrespect toward someone who had sacrificed everything for their country. Karen Daniels, a 48-year-old real estate agent who drove a white BMW with vanity plates and wore designer suits like armor, sat in Judge Judy's courtroom with the kind of smug confidence that came only from years of bulldozing clients without consequence. Across from her sat James Crawford, a 67-year-old retired Marine Corps veteran whose weathered hands trembled slightly as he clutched a folder containing his late wife's photographs and property documents. What happened next would become the most viral courtroom moment in internet history, shared millions of times across every social media platform imaginable, with the hashtag #RespectOurVeterans trending for days. Judge Judy's voice rose with righteous fury as she declared, "This is a lesson you will never forget for the rest of your miserable life." Her words echoed through the courtroom. Not only do you receive zero commission for the nothing you did to earn it, but you will pay Mr. James Crawford $10,000 in damages, $5,000 for breach of contract and failure to perform the services you promised, and $5,000 for emotional distress, for targeting a grieving widower, exploiting his trust, and mocking his military service in my courtroom. Karen's mouth fell open in shock. She stammered, "But that's not fair, Your Honor. I have expenses. I can't just give away $10,000 because he got his feelings hurt over a simple business disagreement." The words were barely out of her mouth before Judge Judy unleashed a verbal assault that would make television history. "Fairness?" Judge Judy's voice thundered. "You want to talk to me about fairness? This man served 24 years in the United States Marine Corps, so people like you could build your pathetic little real estate empire on the foundation of freedom that he and millions like him paid for with their blood, trauma, and sacrifice. He bled on foreign soil while you worried about your commission checks. He buried friends in unmarked graves while you picked out your next luxury handbag. He came home with nightmares that will haunt him until the day he dies, while you sleep peacefully without ever thinking about the cost of that peace. Don't you dare lecture me about fairness when you don't even understand human decency, let alone the meaning of sacrifice." The audience erupted in applause. Even the bailiff didn't quiet them. He, too, was caught up in the emotion of the moment. Judge Judy pointed directly at Karen. "You are a predator, Miss Daniels. You target vulnerable people. You exploit their grief and confusion. You manipulate them with legal language they don't understand. And then you have the audacity to act offended when someone calls you out on your behavior. You saw a widower trying to honor his late wife's memory and saw dollar signs. You saw someone living on a fixed income and saw an opportunity to extract maximum profit for minimum effort. You saw a man who believed in honor and keeping one's word, and you exploited that trust." She leaned forward. "Let me tell you something about contracts, Miss Daniels. They require both parties to act in good faith. You didn't. You violated every standard of professional conduct and human decency." The gavel came down with the finality of a thunderclap. "Case dismissed. Get out of my courtroom. And before you go, let me say something that I hope haunts you for the rest of your life. Thank you for your service." The sarcasm in Judge Judy's voice was so sharp that several audience members gasped. Karen stumbled out of her chair as her briefcase fell open, papers scattering across the floor. She tried to speak, but no words came. Tears streaked her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. She gathered her belongings with trembling hands and ran from the courtroom as scattered applause followed her out the door. Every second of her humiliation was captured on camera. The video spread like wildfire online, and within hours, millions had watched the arrogant agent's downfall. Jim Crawford slowly stood from his chair, straightened his posture, and rendered a crisp salute to Judge Judy. The courtroom fell silent. For the first time in her career, Judge Judy returned the salute. That single image of a judge saluting a veteran became iconic. Social media exploded with messages of respect and gratitude. Viewers praised Judge Judy for standing up for someone who had sacrificed so much. Twitter users made "Respect Our Veterans" trend worldwide. Facebook saw tens of millions of views within a day. Veterans and their families shared their stories of disrespect and thanked Judge Judy for defending them. TikTok filled with emotional reactions from veterans moved to tears. Reddit discussions praised Judge Judy's righteous fury. The clip became the most watched courtroom moment in Internet history. Veterans organizations publicly thanked Judge Judy and invited her to speak at events. Active duty service members across the globe shared the video, saying it meant everything to see someone acknowledge their sacrifice. For Karen Daniels, the fallout was immediate and devastating. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation. That investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern involving dozens of elderly clients who had complained of similar mistreatment. Her brokerage firm terminated her contract, citing zero tolerance for exploitation. Former clients came forward, filing new complaints that created a legal nightmare. Her business pages were flooded with negative reviews before she deleted them all. Harassment online forced her to move homes. Her marriage collapsed after her husband, a Navy veteran, saw the video and realized who she truly was. Jim Crawford's life changed too, but in the best possible way. The property that had caused him so much pain sold quickly, with a patriotic buyer offering well above asking price to honor his service. A GoFundMe campaign raised over $100,000 for him, most of which he donated to veterans' charities helping the homeless and those struggling with PTSD. He kept enough to live comfortably and repair his home. He was invited to speak at veterans events nationwide and featured in military publications. His local VFW post named him Member of the Year and created a scholarship in his late wife Mary's name for children of military families. The case became more than a viral moment. It became a lesson in ethics and respect. Real estate courses began using the video as a case study in integrity. States strengthened protections for elderly clients. Legislators proposed Karen Daniels laws to punish professionals who exploited veterans and vulnerable citizens. Judge Judy's passionate defense of a veteran became part of her legacy, a reminder that sometimes breaking composure is not only appropriate, but necessary when decency is violated. If this story moved you, show your support for veterans like Jim Crawford, people who gave everything so we could live in freedom and safety. Respect is not optional, and neither are the consequences of forgetting it. The courtroom trembled as the words tore through the silence like a thunderclap. "This court is rigged," she screamed, her voice cracking from fury and disbelief. The audience froze, some half smiling, others wide-eyed, because they knew what she clearly didn't. Those 4 words had just signed her social and legal death warrant. Karen Montgomery, a woman who had bulldozed her way through life with sheer volume and arrogance, had made the one mistake you never make in Judge Judy's courtroom, challenging the authority of the law itself. What happened next would become the most unforgettable 47 seconds in courtroom television history. Judge Judy didn't flinch, didn't blink. She simply leaned forward, eyes locked on the plaintiff, who was still trembling with rage. What followed wasn't a trial. It was a televised dissection of entitlement. And before it ended, Karen's voice, once loud enough to rattle the walls, would fall to nothing but a whisper. "Stay till the end." Because this meltdown didn't just go viral. It redefined what happens when arrogance meets judgment. Karen Montgomery wasn't just any plaintiff. She was a walking storm cloud of entitlement wrapped in pastel blazers and self-righteous fury. For years, she'd built a reputation in her small suburban town as the woman who always needed to win. Whether it was returning half-eaten food to restaurants or berating teenage cashiers for disrespect, Karen treated every minor inconvenience as a courtroom drama, where she was both the victim and the star. Her neighbors whispered stories about her temper. One recalled how she once stood outside a supermarket for 2 hours, shouting at the manager because a sale item had run out of stock. Another remembered her forcing a teenage barista to remake her latte 4 times, each time louder than before, until security escorted her out. Karen didn't see herself as difficult. In her mind, she was a crusader for consumer justice. But today, she wasn't fighting a store clerk or a manager. She was standing before Judge Judy, the one person on television who could slice through arrogance like a hot knife through butter. And yet somehow, Karen thought she was the exception, the one woman who could out-talk America's toughest judge. Her case was absurd even by Judy's standards. She was suing a local bakery for emotional distress after being denied a coupon for a free cake sample. The bakery owner claimed she'd been rude and aggressive. Karen insisted she'd been body-shamed and discriminated against for her size. The internet would later call it the cake coupon trial. But inside that courtroom, the laughter hadn't started yet. Karen stood tall, or tried to, as she lectured the bailiff about proper decorum, and adjusted her handbag with the air of someone about to deliver a keynote speech at a legal conference. She truly believed this was her moment of justice. The irony: Judge Judy had already read the case file the night before. She'd seen the bakery's security footage. She knew exactly who Karen was and exactly what kind of performance she was about to deliver. What Karen didn't realize, what she couldn't realize, was that this wasn't going to be a trial. It was going to be an autopsy of arrogance. Every exaggerated sigh, every dismissive smirk, every shouted word would be one more nail in the coffin of her self-manufactured victimhood. And when the gavel finally fell, America would see not a woman defending her dignity, but a woman destroying it one outburst at a time. The moment the cameras began rolling, Karen Montgomery straightened her back and plastered on a smug, rehearsed smile, the kind that told the world she thought she was about to teach Judge Judy a lesson. She clutched a stack of papers so thick it could have doubled as a phone book, filled with printouts, scribbles, and self-made notes she claimed were official evidence. To the untrained eye, it looked like chaos. To Karen, it was proof of her intelligence, her readiness, her superiority. "Your Honor," she began, her tone thick with fake courtesy. "This entire case is about discrimination and humiliation. I was denied service, insulted, and treated like I wasn't human simply because of my appearance." Her words echoed with the confidence of someone used to having the last word, but her voice carried the brittle edge of insecurity beneath the surface. Judge Judy tilted her head slightly, hands folded, expression unreadable. "Go on," she said calmly, the way a lion might let its prey step a little closer before pouncing. The audience leaned in. They could feel it. This wasn't going to end well. Karen continued dramatically flipping through her pages. "I went to Sweet Magnolia Bakery on May 8th to redeem a promotional coupon they themselves sent me. It said, and I quote, 'Enjoy a free sample cake for loyal customers.' I presented the coupon, but the cashier, some teenager, looked me up and down and said, 'Sorry, that's not valid anymore.' Easy." She paused for effect, scanning the room as if expecting sympathy. "Not valid anymore?" It had no expiration date, and when I questioned her, she started laughing. "Laughing, Your Honor?" Her voice climbed sharp and theatrical. She laughed at me in front of other customers and said, "Ma'am, please don't make a scene." But the damage was done. I have never felt so degraded in my life. The plaintiff's table looked like a battlefield. Karen's documents spilled everywhere, half of them irrelevant, others completely unrelated to her claim. There were Yelp reviews she had printed out, social media screenshots, even a complaint form from the local health department she'd filed against the bakery. Weeks later, Judy picked up a sheet delicately like it was contaminated. "Miss Montgomery," she said, "this appears to be a Google Maps review from 3 years ago for a completely different bakery." Karen blinked rapidly. "Well, it shows a pattern of behavior among bakeries in this city." Judy cut her off with a raised hand. "No, it shows a pattern of your behavior." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, quickly smothered by Judy's glare. Karen's lips tightened, but she pressed on. "I have every right to stand up for myself. This isn't just about cake, it's about principle. It's about respect." The courtroom murmured again. Judge Judy glanced toward the defendant's table where a small, nervous woman in a white apron sat quietly. The bakery owner, her name was Hannah Bloom, looked as if she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Judy turned to her. "Mrs. Bloom, you may respond." Hannah's voice was soft, trembling slightly. "Your Honor, we never insulted her. We simply explained that the coupon was for a limited-time offer." She started shouting before I could finish. She called my employee a skinny liar and accused us of discrimination. Judy's eyebrow arched. "Discrimination based on what?" Hannah swallowed. "On her weight," she said. "But, Your Honor, I never mentioned her appearance. I just asked her to calm down. She was recording us on her phone." Karen immediately jumped in, waving her hand like she was back in control. "Yes, I recorded it because I knew they would twist my words." "These people—" "Stop!" Judy said sharply. "You will not speak while I'm addressing the witness." The air in the room thickened. That was the first real warning, and everyone felt it. Karen's jaw clenched, but she fell silent, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Judge Judy leaned back, thinking aloud for the benefit of the cameras. "So, let me get this straight. You received a coupon. You used it after the expiration period. You were told politely it wasn't valid. You responded by yelling, insulting the staff, and recording them without consent." Karen immediately protested. "That's not how it happened." Judy's gaze cut through her words. "That's exactly how it happened. And do you know how I know that, Miss Montgomery?" Karen froze. "Because," Judy continued, "I watched the footage." Gasps erupted across the room. Judy gestured toward a monitor the audience couldn't see, but the crew had ready. "You see, the producers obtained the bakery security recording. I have watched it twice. At no point does anyone mock you. At no point does anyone mention your weight. The only shouting came from you." Karen's mouth fell open, eyes wide. "That footage is edited," she snapped. "They're lying." Judy's tone stayed measured, but her words carried steel. "Do you know how many people have said that to me over the years? Everyone who loses," the audience chuckled quietly. Karen turned scarlet. Her voice rose again, desperate now. "I'm the victim here. This is what happens when people like me stand up against big businesses. They gang up and silence us." Judy raised an eyebrow. "A local bakery with 3 employees is a big business? Silence?" Karen blinked rapidly, trying to regroup. "They humiliated me, Your Honor. I cried for days after that incident. I couldn't even go outside without people staring." Judy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Or perhaps they were staring because you posted your own video online, accusing them of fat-shaming you, and it went viral for the wrong reasons." Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. She'd forgotten about that. "Yes," Judy continued, her tone sharpening. "The video you uploaded where you can be heard shouting at the cashier, calling her a malnourished liar and threatening to shut the place down. That's your voice, correct?" Karen hesitated, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "It was taken out of context." Judy gave a small, humorless laugh. "Of course it was." Then turning to the audience, she added, "It's amazing how often context disappears right after accountability shows up." The gallery erupted in quiet applause before Judy silenced them with a glance. Karen's entire demeanor was unraveling now. Gone was the confidence that carried her through countless confrontations. Her voice trembled as she tried to pivot back to her script. "Regardless, Your Honor, I suffered emotionally. I have a doctor's note." She held up a piece of paper triumphantly, waving it in the air. Judy gestured for it. "Let's see it." Karen hesitated, then reluctantly handed it over. The judge read it, expression blank. "This note is signed by Dr. L. Montgomery." Judy looked up slowly. "Are you related?" A bead of sweat rolled down Karen's temple. "He's my cousin," she admitted. The audience's laughter broke through again. "Your cousin is not your therapist, Miss Montgomery. And even if he were, this note doesn't state any diagnosis. It simply says, you felt stressed." For the first time, Karen's confidence cracked visibly. Her breathing quickened and her voice softened. "But it wasn't fair," she whispered. Judy's reply came swift and cold. "Fairness isn't about feelings. It's about facts. And the facts say you started the fight. You filmed the fight. And you published the fight. You didn't want justice, Miss Montgomery? You wanted attention." The audience erupted again, half laughter, half shock. But Judy didn't smile. She simply leaned forward and said quietly, "You may think you're the victim here, but you've turned your own behavior into evidence." Karen looked like she might cry, but her pride wouldn't let her. Instead, she muttered the words that would go down in courtroom infamy. "This court is rigged." And that's when everything changed. Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't even blink. She just whispered, "Careful," a single word. Calm but terrifying. Everyone in the room knew it. The storm had finally arrived. The next 47 seconds would turn this courtroom from entertainment into legend. The air in the courtroom thickened with tension, as if everyone collectively held their breath. Karen Montgomery, still red-faced from her last outburst, adjusted her blazer and tried to regain control. The cameras caught every nervous flick of her fingers, every twitch of her jaw. She looked like a performer who had forgotten her lines but refused to leave the stage. "I'm not finished," she said sharply, her tone snapping through the silence like a whip. "I still have more evidence." She reached for her papers, shuffling them frantically, but her hands trembled so violently that several sheets slipped to the floor. The bailiff bent to pick them up, but Judge Judy's hand lifted slightly, stopping him. She wanted Karen to sit in her own chaos. "Go ahead," Judy said, her voice quiet and razor-thin. It wasn't permission. It was a warning wrapped in politeness. Karen either didn't hear it or didn't care. She raised her chin, took a deep breath, and began again. "I believe this entire process is unfair. From the moment I walked in, I've been treated like a criminal. The audience is laughing at me, the staff is smirking, and I can feel the bias coming from the bench." Her words carried venom, but beneath it was desperation. The sound of someone realizing the walls were closing in. "This whole show is scripted anyway, isn't it?" she sneered, gesturing toward the cameras. "It's all entertainment for you people. None of this is real justice." The audience gasped audibly. Even the bailiff, who had seen every possible variety of courtroom meltdown, looked momentarily stunned. Calling Judge Judy's court a show might have been the single most suicidal thing a litigant could do on national television. Judy didn't move at first. She simply sat, eyes locked on Karen, still as stone. The silence lasted long enough for Karen to mistake it for weakness. She pressed on, louder now, fueled by her own arrogance. "You know what? Maybe you don't like me because of how I look. Maybe you can't stand confident women who don't fit your little mold." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch, echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "You're just like the rest of them, Judge. Another hypocrite hiding behind a robe." That was the spark. The entire courtroom could feel it. The shift in energy. The calm before the detonation. Judy's expression didn't change, but something in her posture did. She sat up straighter, folded her hands, and stared at Karen with the kind of calm that made grown attorneys break into a cold sweat. When she finally spoke, her tone was soft enough to make everyone lean in. "Did you just accuse this court of being biased?" she asked. Karen hesitated, realizing too late what she'd said. "I'm just saying it doesn't feel fair," she stammered. But Judy wasn't going to let her retreat. "No, Miss Montgomery. You said this court rigged. You accused me on record of running a sham courtroom. Is that your statement?" Karen froze, caught in her own web of pride. Backing down would mean admitting she was wrong. So, she did what she always did. She doubled down. "Yes," she spat. "That's exactly what I said. This court is rigged." The collective gasp from the gallery sounded almost rehearsed, like a wave crashing against the walls. Judy's lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. "Well," she said quietly, "at least we're finally being honest." The tone was deceptively calm, but anyone who had ever watched her show knew what it meant. It was the tone she used moments before dismantling someone's ego piece by piece. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the bench. "Tell me, Miss Montgomery," she said, "what part of this court is rigged? The evidence you brought? The video that exposed your behavior? The doctor's note you faked? Or is it that you don't like the result because it doesn't revolve around your feelings?" Karen opened her mouth to speak, but Judy's voice sliced through her attempt like a blade. "Be very careful with your next words," she warned. The courtroom went deathly silent again. You could hear the faint hum of the lights above, the rustle of camera cables, even the shallow breathing of the audience. Karen shifted in her seat, her defiance fading into unease. "I just meant no," Judy interrupted. "You meant exactly what you said. You called this court rigged because you didn't get your way. You insulted this process because it didn't bend to your ego." She leaned even closer, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "That, Miss Montgomery, is the difference between someone seeking justice and someone throwing a tantrum." For the first time since the trial began, Karen didn't have a comeback. Her lips quivered, her hands fidgeted, and her gaze darted between the cameras and the audience, searching for support that wasn't there. The power she'd walked in with was gone, replaced by the heavy weight of humiliation. Judy didn't move, didn't blink, didn't raise her voice. She simply let the silence hang there long enough for Karen to feel its full gravity. Then, with a tone so calm it was almost surgical, Judy said, "Let's proceed. I want everyone watching to see what happens when emotion meets evidence." The camera zoomed in on Karen's face, pale, tight, and trembling. The woman who had accused a courtroom of corruption was about to learn that integrity doesn't need to shout. It simply waits for the truth to do its work. And in Judge Judy's courtroom, truth was a weapon. There was a beat of silence so long and deliberate that even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Judge Judy's eyes didn't leave Karen's for a single second. It was as if time itself was holding its breath, waiting for judgment to fall. Then, in that quiet, Judy spoke 4 words that would define the next 47 seconds of courtroom history. "Let's talk about truth." Her tone was measured, but beneath it was the kind of power that could shake foundations. "You've accused this court of being rigged, so let's see if your truth can survive the evidence." The countdown had begun. The energy in the room shifted. Audience members leaned forward. The Bev subtly straightened his stance, and Karen, oblivious to her impending ruin, crossed her arms like a defiant child about to be scolded. "First," Judy began, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made even the walls listen. "You brought documents you claim proved discrimination. Let's review them together." She reached for the pile of papers on the plaintiff's desk, holding up one sheet at a time with surgical precision. "This complaint form you filed addressed to the National Commission for Bakery Bias, not a real organization." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Judy continued, unflinching. "This letter from your legal advisor? He's a YouTube personality who hasn't passed the bar exam anywhere on this planet." Another wave of restrained amusement filled the room. "And this last one, the so-called medical note that you claimed proves emotional trauma. It's handwritten by your cousin, who conveniently shares your last name. Are we starting to see a pattern, Miss Montgomery?" Karen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Judy wasn't done. She set the papers down and leaned forward, eyes sharp enough to pierce steel. "You know what I find fascinating?" she asked. "People who scream the loudest about fairness are usually the ones trying hardest to twist it." Karen blinked rapidly, her confidence evaporating by the second. Judy's voice grew quieter and somehow even more terrifying. "The moment you walked into this courtroom, you believed the world owed you something. You thought your volume could replace evidence. You thought your outrage could rewrite the facts. But this isn't social media, Miss Montgomery. This is a court of law." The seconds ticked away as Judy's dismantling grew more deliberate, more devastating. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Every syllable hit like a gavel strike. "Here's the reality you can't handle," Judy said, leaning in close enough that the microphone caught every controlled breath. "You came here looking for validation, not justice. You wanted to turn your tantrum into a televised victory, but instead, you turned it into a confession. Karen's face was drained of color. A confession, Judy repeated, that you were never a victim. You were the aggressor. The audience was spellbound. The infamous 47 seconds were nearly up. Karen's eyes glistened, her lips trembling as if her body finally understood what her mind refused to accept. Judge Judy straightened in her chair, her voice soft but absolute. "Now that we've established the truth," she said, "let's establish the consequence." The last second ticked. The countdown was over. The explosion that followed would echo through television history. But for Karen Montgomery, it was the moment she realized that justice doesn't need volume. It just needs time. Judge Judy's expression never changed, but her tone deepened into that cold, surgical calm that always signaled one thing. The dissection was about to begin. Karen Montgomery sat frozen, her earlier fury now replaced with a wide-eyed disbelief. She had wanted attention, and now she had it. Millions of eyes watching as her credibility unraveled in real time. Judy folded her hands together and spoke with quiet precision. "Let's start with something simple. You've accused this bakery of discrimination. You filed false paperwork and you've lied under oath. Do you understand the seriousness of that?" Karen swallowed hard, her lips barely moving. "I didn't lie," she muttered. Judy tilted her head slightly like a predator studying its prey. "You didn't lie?" she repeated softly. "Then perhaps you can explain why your own video shows you threatening to shut down the bakery over a coupon worth less than $10. That's not discrimination, Miss Montgomery. That's intimidation." The audience let out a collective gasp. Karen tried to recover, reaching for her papers as if the pile of crumpled printouts might somehow save her. "That video was edited," she shouted. Judy's eyes narrowed. "Edited by who? The bakery? The government? The Illuminati?" The courtroom burst into laughter. Judy waited for the noise to subside before leaning forward again. "You see, Miss Montgomery, this is what happens when people live in a world where consequences are optional. You think you can twist the truth until it fits your comfort? But in my courtroom, the truth doesn't bend. It breaks people who try to fake it." Karen's eyes filled with tears. But Judy didn't soften. "You came here claiming emotional damage." She said, "You wanted $5,000 for embarrassment. Let me make something clear. Embarrassment isn't something people do to you. It's something you do to yourself." Her words hit like bricks. Karen's head dropped. But Judy wasn't finished. "You call this court rigged. You call me biased, yet every single piece of evidence points to one truth. You humiliated a young cashier, lied about it, and now you're sitting here angry because the world finally stopped listening to your noise." Judy's voice sharpened as she delivered the final blow. "Do you know what real discrimination looks like, Miss Montgomery? It's not a bakery refusing to honor an expired coupon. It's people who suffer because of who they are, not what they demand. You turned your inconvenience into a crusade, and now you're shocked that no one's marching with you." Karen's breathing grew shallow. The once loud voice that had filled the courtroom was now reduced to silence. The only sound was the steady rhythm of Judy's verdict approaching like thunder. Judy leaned back, her words slower now. "Deliberate. You said this court is rigged." "No, Miss Montgomery. What's rigged is your view of reality. The truth doesn't revolve around your feelings, and justice doesn't answer your pride." She paused just long enough for the words to settle. "So let me return the favor. Here's my ruling." The gavel hadn't even struck yet, but the sentence was already written across Karen's face. She sat motionless, her pride deflating under the weight of the truth. Judy looked at her one last time, her voice low but firm. "You wanted your day in court. Congratulations, you got it. And now the entire country will remember it for all the wrong reasons." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the silence. The moment it hit, Karen flinched. The same woman who had accused the system of bias, who had shouted at the cameras, who had tried to twist the narrative into her favor, now sat speechless, defeated not by the system she hated, but by the truth she couldn't outrun. The gavel's echo faded, but the weight of Judge Judy's words hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. The courtroom sat in stunned silence, every spectator frozen in their seat, processing the humiliation they had just witnessed. Karen Montgomery blinked rapidly, her breath uneven, as though her mind was scrambling to rewrite what had just happened. But there was no saving it. She had accused the most feared judge on television of bias. And now she was sitting in the ashes of her own arrogance. Judy removed her glasses and placed them gently on the bench. Her voice softened, not out. Of mercy, but clarity. "Miss Montgomery," she began, "you came into this courtroom demanding respect. But you forgot one thing. You must first give it." The tone was calm, even maternal, but beneath it pulsed something ironclad. "You've spent so long convincing yourself that the world is against you, that you've become your own enemy. You wanted justice, but what you truly wanted was attention. Unfortunately for you, justice and attention don't share a stage." Karen sat slumped, her once defiant shoulders caving inward. She murmured something under her breath, but the microphones caught it. "I just wanted to be heard." It wasn't anger this time, it was a defeat. Judy nodded slightly. "And you were loudly. But being heard doesn't mean being right." The audience erupted in murmurs again, a mix of pity and satisfaction. It was the perfect punctuation to a public undoing that no one would forget. Then Judy leaned forward, her tone changing from reflective to judicial. "Here is my verdict," she said firmly. "The court finds in favor of the defendant. The bakery owes you nothing. Not a dime, not an apology, not another second of their peace." Karen's eyes widened as if the final nail had been driven into her case. "In addition," Judy continued, "you are ordered to pay court costs for wasting the time of this bench and this staff. Consider your first and last warning about abusing the legal system for personal spectacle." Karen's lips parted, trembling as if she wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The words wouldn't come. The reality of what had just unfolded on national television finally landed. She had not only lost her case, she had lost her reputation, her composure, and her manufactured image of moral superiority. Her face reddened, not from anger this time, but from shame. She turned slightly toward the audience, as if searching for a sympathetic glance, but all she met were cold stares and the faint, unforgiving glare of the studio lights. Judge Judy's final words were softer now, almost reflective, but they struck harder than anything she had said before. "There is nothing more dangerous than self-righteousness without self-awareness. You came here to prove the world wrong, and instead, the world saw who you really are." Case dismissed. The gavel came down one last time. Final. Absolute. Karen didn't move. The bailiff gestured toward her papers still scattered across the table, but she didn't gather them. Instead, she stared at the floor, blinking back tears that refused to fall. The woman who once screamed that the court was rigged now sat in a silence of her own making. The audience began to stir, whispers spreading like wildfire. "That's going viral," one woman muttered under her breath. Another said softly, "She'll never live that down." Judy rose from her seat, her robe swaying slightly as she exited the bench. No dramatic flourish, no final glare, just quiet authority. The kind that needed no applause. The camera caught Karen's face one last time before the credits rolled. Pale, broken, and utterly speechless. And in that image, the moral wrote itself. When arrogance challenges truth, it always loses the argument. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the echoes of what had happened refused to fade. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. Each platform lit up with the same headline. Woman screams, "This court is rigged." Judge Judy ends it in 47 seconds. Millions watched, shared, and replayed the moment when arrogance met its reckoning. Comment sections filled with lines like, "Judy didn't even raise her voice." And that's what real justice looks like. Even those who had never seen a full episode of Judge Judy before suddenly knew who Karen Montgomery was, and not for the reasons she'd ever wanted. The bakery at the center of it all, Sweet Magnolia, became a national symbol overnight. Customers flooded in, leaving notes that read, "Justice tastes sweet." And for Hannah Bloom, the woman who stayed calm, Their sales tripled in a week. And the humble cashier Karen once mocked was interviewed on national TV for her composure. Meanwhile, Karen deleted her social media accounts one by one, trying to escape the storm she had summoned. But it was too late. The internet has a long memory and an even longer appetite for poetic justice. Judge Judy's closing words played on loop across platforms. There is nothing more dangerous than self-righteousness without self-awareness. People quoted it, stitched it, and turned it into a viral mantra. Some wrote essays about it. Others made memes. But everyone agreed on one thing. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a mirror. A reminder that the loudest person in the room isn't always the one who's right. As the dust settled, a quiet moral rose from the wreckage of Karen's meltdown. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it just sits still and waits for the truth to arrive. And when it does, it doesn't need to shout. It simply stands there undeniable and final. Karen Montgomery's fall wasn't about a coupon or even about Judge Judy. It was about what happens when entitlement mistakes itself for courage, when pride mistakes itself for power. The final narration faded in, soft and deliberate. Loud doesn't mean right. And in that courtroom, silence wasn't defeat. It was the sound of accountability. The screen darkened, leaving only the echo of Judy's gavel. A single perfect strike that reminded millions that justice, when it finally speaks, doesn't need to raise its voice. If you believe Judge Judy was right to stand up to arrogance, comment "Justice served" below. Subscribe for more real courtroom moments.